Hey guys, it's Dr. SC here, and we're back with another SpongeBob episode ranking video. I made it a mission to rank all the SpongeBob seasons, no matter how long that takes. I've done 1 through 4, now it's time for Season 5. Season 5 is definitely the worst so far, not even close. Season 4 was the last season I would consider good. This one isn't terrible, but it's not good like the first 4. They pick up in Season 9, but that's not for a while. So let's get into number 41, which is just terrible. Alright, A Flea in Her Dome. Easily the worst episode of the first 5 seasons for me. I don't know how to explain how bad this is, and I don't want to. So all I'll say is that I watched every episode of the season in preparation for these videos. But A Flea in Her Dome is the only one I did not watch, just because I remembered how bad it was. And that was probably a very good decision. Number 40, Fungus Among Us, is really not much better than A Flea in Her Dome. In fact, I regret rewatching it. It's gross, unfair to SpongeBob, weird, and once again, it is disturbingly gross. Watching this episode left a very bad taste in my mouth, and it just was not fun. I really hate episodes like this. Sadly, seasons 6 through 8 have a lot of them. Definitely not excited to tackle those seasons. But this episode is very weird for Season 5. Not saying it's a great season, just usually not this bad. Bandit Bikini Bottom is one of the most forgettable episodes in the entire series. It's way better than 40 and 41, but it's still awful. If it wasn't for the extremely irritating and annoying song they played like 4 times, maybe this wouldn't be this low. But all the new characters are unlikable, the settings are boring, and nothing creative is brought to the episode. Next up is Waiting. More like waiting for this episode to get good. Haha, get it, because it's called Waiting, and it's not good. Whatever, in the next episode. When rewatching Season 5, To Love a Patty was the one that left me the most confused. I didn't really know what to make of it. The concept is so bizarre and crazy that it almost felt like a fan fiction or something like that. It didn't feel official. There was also a song in the middle. It wasn't a good song, but I don't think it was trying to be. This whole thing felt like it was making fun of itself. But it just did not work for me at all. Thus why it's ranked so low on the list. Most people have Atlantis SquarePantis at the bottom of the list, and I can see why. But I do like a lot of the visuals in this episode. The scenes with Krabs and Squidward's songs were very cool to look at and very creative. But obviously the main thing bringing this down were the actual sound of the songs. There were like 10 songs in this episode and all of them were atrocious, especially the first one. This episode is probably the worst special in all of SpongeBob, because it's all filler and it didn't even need to be 20 minutes long. But it's an hour long? I mean, that's just ridiculous. Rise and Shine is one of the many shorts in this season. There were a lot of them, and this one is one of the worst. It's lazy, uninteresting, forgettable, and nothing made me laugh. In fact, I don't even know what to say. Well, back to the short episodes, and the next one is The Krusty Plate. This one is also just so forgettable. All these shorts are forgettable except for 1 or 2. The Krusty Plate has SpongeBob getting a speck off a plate, but he ends up destroying the Krusty Krab. Doesn't sound too interesting, but at least it wasn't full length, because that would be even worse than what we got. There would be way more filler, but that's the only positive thing I can say about the actual episode we got. Slimy Dancing was a very weird episode. Squidward went inside of SpongeBob's body and danced for him at a contest. It sounds weird and it is weird. They don't do anything else with it as well. They just have Squidward getting jealous and then we see him dancing. But the weirdest thing is that the judges didn't like Squidward's dance. I mean, it was awesome. Man, these shorts are killing me. And Picture Day is one of the worst. There's some interesting ideas, which is why it's not even lower. But it's still so boring. Very, very boring. SpongeBob goes around town to get to his school picture day, but stuff keeps getting in his way. It's as boring as it sounds. Also, who was ever this excited for Picture Day? That was always something I always dreaded whenever it came up. There was some creativity, but it was overall really bland. Whatever Happened to SpongeBob or Who Bob What Pants is a pretty below average special. It has a lot of weird writing choices, like why all the main cast kept on calling him Idiot Boy, especially Sandy. I mean, that was totally uncalled for. She's usually a great friend, but that was not cool. Squidward also was weirdly aggressive against him and actively tried to get him away, unlike previous seasons where he did care for him. And SpongeBob getting amnesia was kind of unnecessary. Ray Liotta was in it, so that was kind of cool, I guess, but other than that, it was a pretty bland episode. Both Smarts is another short, and it's another bad one. The dummy joke was pretty funny, I guess, but most of this episode is just SpongeBob being stupid, driving a car even though he doesn't have a license. How is he driving his car? Anyway, yeah, this one is pretty meh in my opinion, just like all the other specials. Good Old What's-His-Name is another boring and unforgettable short episode. There's some stuff that surprised me, like how his name was actually What's It To Ya, but most of it is just Squidward going insane trying to find someone's name, and it's really nothing special, just another forgettable episode in the forgettable season that is Season 5. Stanley S. SquarePants is one of the episodes that focuses on SpongeBob's family in the season, which I did a lot looking back at it. But while the concept is interesting, this episode is kinda meh. Stanley is a very annoying and uninteresting character to me. His whole personality is that he messes up everything. And also, SpongeBob is very cruel-hearted in this episode. I mean, a normal person would get like that, but this is SpongeBob we're talking about here. New Digs is one of the weirdest episodes in the season. SpongeBob moves into the Krusty Krab and tons of very strange things happen. The scene where SpongeBob's mom was showering and Krabs walked in was especially weird. It wasn't funny, it just left a weird taste in my mouth. And when SpongeBob put his underwear in the cash register, there's some funny stuff in this one, but most of it is very weird and strange, not to mention extremely boring. Breath of Fresh Squidward is actually pretty interesting for part of the episode, being the middle, when Squidward actually is nice and it's cool to see it happen. But the beginning consists of annoying Squidward bullying, and the end, SpongeBob is really annoying. But the middle is cool to see Squidward become an entirely new person. I also like the joke at the end where SpongeBob and Patrick become like Squidward. Overall, this one definitely isn't good, but it could have been worse. I definitely had some fun with it. The Krusty Sponge is another very strange episode, just like a lot of the other ones in the season. The idea of the Krusty Krab basically becoming a SpongeBob-themed restaurant is very odd, and the way they put it in the show is also odd. Krabs feeds people poisoned Krabby Patties that look like SpongeBob, and they turn into zombies. SpongeBob and Squidward drive this train thing and get exhausted from it, and probably the worst part is when Squidward ends up having to drive the train for the judge. This is a very unfair episode, and I think a lot of characters got treated a bit too harshly. SpongeBob and Patrick go insane and try to eat each other. Fun, right? Yeah, that's what I thought. Going into this, I thought that to save a squirrel would be a lot lower, but it did have some funny moments, and I thought the reveal at the end that Sandy was the old man was pretty cool. But this episode is a bit too strange, and it just doesn't really feel like a SpongeBob episode, with some very violent ideas, like eating each other. So yeah, it doesn't rank any higher. Money Talks is probably the most average episode of the whole season. It's not that funny, the premise is kinda weird, and it doesn't really allow for tons of cool stuff to happen. The Flying Dutchman showed up, who I usually like, but here he just doesn't seem welcome. And the weirdest thing was that Krabs actually spent his money on worthless junk. That was extremely weird, and I thought he would have requested the Flying Dutchman to lift the curse way earlier. I know a lot of people are going to be kind of mad about this, but Pat No Pay is an episode I found myself surprisingly entertained by. It is by no means good, but I thought it was funny and harmless stuff that I had some fun with. But once again, it's still short, and we've already seen Patrick work at the Krusty Krab and fail before, so it wasn't that original of an idea. But the episode surprisingly left me enjoyed, and I laughed a few times, especially when Mr. Krabs says that there's no way he messed up the trash compactor, but when he comes in it just exploded. SpongeBob vs. the Patty Gadget is another little short. That's not bad, but nothing to write home about. A lot of people really like it, but I didn't think it was that great. It's pretty interesting and there's some clever scenes, but the poemist style they used to narrate the story was kind of annoying and I'm not too fond of it. And the characters barely even talk, it's only the machine, which is quite frustrating. But this one had some interesting ideas and I think it deserves to be this high. Plankton is a character that had a lot of good episodes in the season, and Goo Goo Gas is one of them. It's not a great episode, but it was pretty fun and enjoyable. Especially the scene where Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob used knitting to catch Plankton because they were so old, and the scene where Plankton shrinks at the end and turns into an amoeba is hilarious. But then there's these weird scenes with baby drool and more gross baby stuff, which wasn't the best. Spongehenge is one of the most mysterious and talked about episodes in the entirety of SpongeBob SquarePants, and it's usually not for a good reason. And while yeah, it's very weird and has some pacing problems, I think it's very creative, and I was definitely fascinated by it. I thought that the premise was going to make the episode worse. I mean, SpongeBob attracting other jellyfish is an episode we've seen many times, but luckily most of the episode was about SpongeBob creating statues and losing his mind, which I thought was pretty entertaining and fascinating. This is just my opinion though, I know a lot of people really hate this episode. Squidward's hair completely carried the original fry cook. I mean, look at that thing. If that thing wasn't in this episode, this would be at the bottom of the list. Late Big Switch is a pretty funny episode. I liked all of the new characters, especially the new chef at the Krusty Krab, who I thought was really funny. And the part where SpongeBob kept on making Krabby Patties from the most crazy ingredients is also hilarious. Definitely not the best episode of the season, but it was a solid and funny one. The Battle of Bikini Bottom is a nice, entertaining, creative episode. I like the idea of it. SpongeBob and Patrick have their opinions on cleanliness clash in a stupid battle. Tons of the moments were creative and definitely impressed me quite a bit. Where I think this one lacks is the jokes. All of the visuals are great, but this one just isn't that funny. In fact, I can't recall one time where I laughed in this episode, which is never a good thing for SpongeBob. But this episode is still good. Well, we have reached the best short in the season, Donut of Shame. This episode has some of the best Patrick moments. He actually cares and doesn't want to make SpongeBob mad that he stole his donut. It's fun to see him come up with these clever ideas on how to hide the donut as well. And seeing his inner thoughts on what would happen with the hiding spots were hilarious. Donut of Shame is a fun little short that made its way up my list over time. 20,000 Patties Under the Sea is one of the funniest episodes of the season. There were so many moments that left me cracking up. Obviously, Plankton roasting the family.
Someone should put you in a box floating down the river, Grandma!
But then the funniest part about that was when Plankton said people are crazy.
You people are crazy! I'm getting out of here!
That was hilarious because he just insulted all these random people and he calls them crazy. I also like the giant monster thing. He was funny and had some great lines. Overall, this episode was hilarious. Bucket Sweet Bucket is a really funny and creative episode that consists of more plankton. Plankton is once again hilarious in this episode. My favorite line is when he said that he liked log cabins.
A log cabin? Yeah, I just think they're so cozy.
Not only because it was funny, but I also thought it gave us more to know about him, and that he actually cares about things other than the formula. And obviously SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward are great together. This episode is just really great. Blackened Sponge is one of the most underrated episodes of the season in my opinion. There's so much cool stuff going on in this one. The new character they introduced is interesting, and I like the short amount of screen time he got. And the episode is also just really funny. My favorite part was when SpongeBob just went around showing his black eye to everyone and expecting them to care. And when he told everybody his made-up story even though nobody cared. Those scenes were great and made me like this episode a lot more. Season 5 paid a lot of attention to SpongeBob's family, and Blackjack is the best episode about this topic. I like SpongeBob going around seeing all of his different family members, because I like them, and whenever they're on screen it makes for some fun moments. I also like the uncle character who would turn anything SpongeBob said into a chore. Somehow that joke just didn't get old. I also like and dislike the twist that Blackjack is small because it is funny, but it also didn't really explain if he shrunk or was always like that. But it doesn't matter because this episode is very funny and just barely misses out on my top 10. Spy Buddies starts the top 10, and despite its high ranking, I don't have much to say about it. I like seeing Plankton's everyday life, and the episode was really funny and had an interesting idea. Seeing the two idiots of the show become spies sounds interesting, and it is interesting when it becomes a full episode. Definitely one of the better and more memorable episodes of Season 5. A lot of people don't like Nightlight, but I found myself more entertained watching this one than any other in the season. Nightlight has no idea what it's doing with itself. At first it's just SpongeBob being afraid of the dark, but then Patrick comes along and attempts to have a sleepover with him. But then Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy come into the mix and have to fight Luke Skywalker. Yeah, this episode is as crazy as it sounds, but it's still extremely entertaining and very funny. Roller Cowards comes in at number 8 only because of how relatable it is. I can't relate specifically to roller coasters because I don't really like to go to amusement parks at all, mostly because I hate roller coasters. But I do tend to pretend to like something even though I don't, just to fit in and look normal. So it was fun to watch SpongeBob and Patrick do it and conquer their fears. It's not the funniest episode, I can just relate to it a lot. Mermaid Man vs. SpongeBob is actually one of my favorite episodes this season. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff we've seen before, like tricking the kids into stuff to get money, like in Krabby Land, and Plankton mind-controlling people. But this episode is just too good. SpongeBob becoming a superhero is very fun to watch, and I love how Mermaid Man can't even be controlled well because of how dumb he is, and the fact that he needed fiber to digest a Krabby Patty is hilarious. Yeah, this one is definitely one of my favorite Mermaid Man episodes. Sing a Song of Patrick is definitely one of the funniest episodes of the season. There's so many funny jokes in this episode that I remember it for. Patrick's song in general is just really funny. Some of the lines in it are so nonsensical and stupid that it ends up being hilarious. And the dodgeball thing was definitely strange, but it was still very funny when all those random people had dodgeballs with them and threw the Patrick with his old gym coach. But it's not good enough for the top 5 in my opinion. Crabs a la mode is kinda like Nightlight. It's extremely bizarre and doesn't really have a well-constructed plot, but it has super cool visuals, tons of funny moments, and a captivating premise. The whole sequence on the ice is so hectic and eventful, it was definitely the best part of the episode. In fact, this episode never has a boring moment. All 11 minutes are entertaining, which is why this great episode makes my top 5. The Two Faces of Squidward is obviously mostly known for the beautiful specimen that is Handsome Squidward. But other than the meme, this episode is genuinely hilarious. All of the visuals in the second half are so funny, especially this one shot of Squidward falling in style. And I love the fact that everyone treats Handsome Squidward like a god and tries to steal his stuff. This episode is great and just barely misses out on my top 3. As you know from my Season 4 ranking, I love Dunces and Dragons, so it should be no surprise that I also love Pest of the West. It's basically the same thing, but in the Old West instead of medieval times. We get to see all the main characters as people in the West, and we get to see actual real things. We get turned into underwater variants. Like what I'm guessing is alcohol turns into milk, and the horses turns into the coffins. This episode is not the funniest, but the concept is too good for it to not be ranked this high on the list. Another flaw I have is that the songs aren't that great, but we can ignore that because the song is usually not that good in SpongeBob. I really wanted to put Inmates of Summer at number 1, but I can't. It's definitely the episode I had the most fun with. It is absolutely hilarious. There's countless jokes that left me laughing for minutes. I also love the main prison warden. He was hilarious, especially the scene where he throws off SpongeBob and Patrick's luggage, and when he actually ends up loving the play. But there were so many other things he did that were hysterical, but my favorite part is probably this line.
I had no idea they had a hot tub.
I mean, that is hilarious, but I can't put this one at number 1, and I'm sure you know it is going to be number 1. Most of my number 1s, I talk a lot about them because I love them so much. But I really can't do that for Friend or Foe. I really like it, but it's the worst number 1 so far, by a lot. I've stated many times that one of my favorite parts about the series is the relationship between Mr. Krabs and Plankton, and this episode tackles this topic and made me appreciate it even more. I loved seeing their history together and what went wrong. It was also cool to see them actually get along, because we never actually get to see that. This episode definitely made me understand why Mr. Krabs likes money so much as well, because he grew up poor. I love when this show gives us little details about the characters like that. This one could have been one of my favorite special episodes if it was a bit funnier. I don't recall anything that was really funny in this one, but it is still the best episode of SpongeBob Season 5 despite that. Well, Seasons 1 through 5 are officially ranked, and we all know what comes next. Yep, mid-season SpongeBob, everybody's favorite seasons. God, I can't wait to finish these seasons and move on to Season 9, because 6 through 8 are not going to be fun to watch and rank.